Your phone rings while you're waiting at a traffic light. An investment magazine wants to confirm your net worth before publishing its annual list of the world's wealthiest people. The number sounds unreal, not because it's large, because you remember exactly where you started. You remember a one-room apartment. You remember hearing your parents discuss bills after midnight when they thought you were asleep. You remember learning very early that money controlled almost every decision in your house. Today, that story changes forever. Level 1, observation, age 18. You don't start with money. You start with curiosity. While your friends scroll social media, you study how businesses around you operate. You work long shifts at a warehouse. Most people see boxes. You see systems. You notice which products move fastest. You notice which customers buy repeatedly. You begin carrying a small notebook. You write down patterns. Not ideas. Patterns. Without realizing it, you are training the skill that will eventually make you wealthy. Seeing opportunities that other people walk past every day. Most people think wealth begins with money, but money is usually the result, not the beginning. The beginning is awareness, the ability to notice things that other people ignore. Every day, hundreds of customers pass through the warehouse. To most workers, one customer looks exactly like another, but you start noticing differences. You notice which products disappear from shelves first. You notice which items customers buy together. You notice that some products seem ordinary, yet generate constant demand. At first, these observations don't seem important. There is no immediate reward, no promotion, no extra paycheck, no applause, just a teenager carrying a notebook and paying attention. But that habit starts changing the way your mind works. While other people focus on entertainment, you become fascinated by patterns. You begin asking questions. Why do some businesses thrive while others fail? Why do some products become popular overnight? Why do customers keep returning to certain brands? The more questions you ask, the more connections you begin to see. The world starts looking different. A restaurant is no longer just a restaurant. It's a system. A store is no longer just a store. It's a machine designed to solve problems and create value. Everywhere you look, you begin seeing invisible structures behind visible results. And something interesting happens. You stop thinking like a consumer. You start thinking like an owner. That shift is small, but it changes everything. Owners see opportunities. Consumers see products. Owners see systems. Consumers see transactions. Without realizing it, your mindset is beginning to separate from crowd. The notebook fills with observations, customer behavior, pricing strategies, sales patterns, business ideas inspired by real-world problems. You are not trying to become wealthy yet. You're simply trying to understand why some things work and others don't. That curiosity becomes a competitive advantage because most people want answers. Very few people spend time learning how to ask better questions. Month after month, the notebook grows thicker. The pages contain lessons gathered from ordinary days. Nothing dramatic, nothing exciting, just observations. But success often hides inside ordinary moments, and this is one of them. Years later, when people look at your success, they'll search for a secret. They'll look for a lucky break, a special connection, a shortcut. They won't realize that one of the most important investments you ever made cost almost nothing. A small notebook, a curious mind, and the discipline to pay attention, because opportunities rarely appear fully formed. Most of the time, they appear disguised as patterns, and you have spent years training yourself to see them. Long before you build wealth, you build awareness. Long before you build companies, you build understanding. Long before you create assets, you create perspective. And without realizing it, that perspective is preparing you for the next stage of the journey. The stage where observation finally turns into action. the stage where your first asset begins to take shape. Level 2, the first asset, age 23, you save your first meaningful amount of money. Instead of buying status, you buy leverage. A simple online business begins generating income. The money is small, but the lesson is enormous. You discover that income earned while you sleep feels different than income earned by the hour. Most people celebrate their first profits. You reinvest yours. Every dollar becomes a worker. Every worker goes back to work. At first, the results are almost invisible. The business is not making headlines. Nobody is interviewing you. Nobody is calling you a success story. Most days feel ordinary. You wake up. You go to work. You learn new skills. You improve the business little by little. And then you repeat the process again the next day. The profits are small enough that many people would ignore them. But you don't, because the amount isn't what excites you. The principle is, for the first time in your life, money is being generated by an asset, not by your physical presence, not by the number of hours you can work, not by how tired you are willing to become. An asset is beginning to produce value on its own. That realization changes the way you think about income forever. You start understanding the difference between earning money and owning something that earns money. The difference sounds small, but the long-term consequences are enormous. Most people spend money to improve how they appear. You spend money to improve how your future operates. Every profit gets a new assignment. Some of it improves the business. Some of it funds better tools. Some of it purchases education. Some of it creates new opportunities. Very little is spent on impressing strangers. Because you've started to understand something powerful. Wealth is often built in private before it becomes visible in public. While others are displaying success, you're quietly constructing it. There are moments when the temptation becomes difficult. You see friends buying expensive cars. You see people showing off vacations online. You see lifestyles that look successful from the outside. And for a moment, you wonder if you're missing out. But then you remember why you started. You remember the conversations about bills. You remember the stress in your parents' voices. You remember how money seemed to control every major decision in your childhood home. And suddenly, the choice becomes easier. You are not building for today. You are building for decades. That mindset allows you to delay rewards that many people cannot resist. Month after month, the business improves. Customer feedback teaches valuable lessons. Mistakes reveal weaknesses. Problems expose opportunities. Some ideas fail completely. Others perform better than expected. Instead of seeing failure as a disaster, you begin seeing it as information. Each mistake teaches something useful. Each setback improves your understanding. Each challenge strengthens your decision-making. Slowly, confidence starts replacing uncertainty, not because everything is working, but because you are learning how to adapt. You are learning how businesses actually grow, not through luck, not through perfect timing, but through consistent improvement. Then something remarkable happens. The business earns money while you're asleep. You wake up and discover new sales, new customers, new growth. And although the amount isn't life-changing yet, the concept is, for the first time, you experience leverage. A single hour of effort can continue producing value long after that hour has ended. That realization becomes addictive, not because of greed, because of freedom. You begin imagining what happens if one asset becomes two, if one customer becomes 1,000, if one small system becomes a larger one. The possibilities start expanding, and with every passing month, your belief grows stronger. The notebook that once contained observations is now producing action. The patterns you studied are becoming real-world decisions. The lessons are becoming assets, and the assets are becoming income. You still have a long way to go, but something important has changed. You are no longer simply observing opportunity. You are creating it. The foundation has been built. The first asset is working, and momentum is about to begin. Level 3, momentum, age 28. The business grows. Customers arrive without being chased. Processes replace chaos. Systems replace effort. You begin earning more from decisions than from labor. People think success arrived suddenly. They didn't see the thousands of invisible days before this one. Momentum doesn't feel like fireworks at first. It feels like repetition. Small improvements stacking on top of each other. One process becomes smoother. One system becomes faster. One customer experience becomes easier. Then another, and another, until suddenly, the entire structure begins to move on its own. At this stage, something important changes in how you work. You are no longer fixing everything manually. You are no longer the center of every task. Instead, you are designing the structure that handles the tasks. This shift feels strange at first, because for years, effort was your identity. Hard work was your identity. Long hours were your identity. Now the goal is no longer how much you can do personally. The goal is how much can continue working without you. That transition is uncomfortable because it forces you to trust systems more than effort. And trust is not easy when everything used to depend on you. But slowly you start seeing results. Not dramatic results, but consistent ones, predictable ones. The kind of results that build stability instead of excitement. And stability is what allows growth to compound. You begin noticing something interesting. Problems that once took your full attention now get solved automatically. Customers are served faster. Processes become cleaner. Mistakes become less frequent. The business starts feeling less like chaos and more like structure. And in that structure, something powerful is born. Momentum. Momentum is not just growth. It is growth that continues even when you're not actively pushing it forward every second. It is the result of systems working together. It is the outcome of decisions made earlier, continuing to pay off today. There are moments when you step back and realize something surprising. The business is now larger than your daily effort. Not because you stopped working, but because your work has multiplied through systems. At this point, your focus begins to shift again. You stop asking, how do I do more? And start asking, how do I build better? Better systems, better structure, better decision making. Because you realize something important. Effort has limits, but systems do not. Effort is linear. Systems are exponential. This is where most people plateau. They keep trying to scale effort instead of scaling structure. But you are beginning to understand the difference. And that understanding changes everything. People outside your world see results. They see progress. They see success. But they don't see the foundation underneath it all. They don't see the late nights building systems that almost failed. They don't see the experiments that didn't work. They don't see the decisions that took months to pay off. They only see the outcome, not the process. But you know the truth. Momentum is not luck. It is accumulated discipline. It is hundreds of small decisions that eventually become powerful enough to carry themselves forward. And now, that momentum is strong enough to support something bigger, something more complex, something that requires a new version of you. Leadership. Level 4, leadership, age 33. You stop doing everything yourself. You hire people smarter than you in specific areas. This feels uncomfortable. For years, your identity was being the hardest worker. Now your job is building a team. The company expands faster than your personal effort ever could. Leadership does not feel like progress at first. It feels like letting go of control, letting go of speed, letting go of the idea that things only work if you do them yourself. At first, you try to stay involved in everything, every decision, every detail, every problem. But the system starts to break under that pressure. Because a growing business cannot run through one person. It needs structure. It needs delegation. It needs trust. Slowly, you begin learning a new skill. Not building, but building builders. People who can solve problems without your direct input. People who think differently from you. People who bring strengths you do not have. This is where growth becomes uncomfortable again, because hiring smarter people forces you to confront something important. You are no longer the only source of intelligence in the system, and that can feel threatening at first. But it is also necessary, because a company does not scale through one mind. It scales through many minds working together. As the team grows, something interesting happens. Your role changes from execution to direction, from doing the work to defining the work, from solving problems to identifying which problems matter. And that shift is harder than it looks, because execution gives immediate feedback. Direction does not. You make decisions today that only show results weeks or months later. So, patience becomes part of leadership. You begin to understand that leadership is not about being the busiest person in the room. It is about being the clearest thinker in the room. Clarity becomes more valuable than speed, and communication becomes more valuable than effort. You start repeating yourself often, explaining vision, reinforcing priorities, aligning people toward the same goal. At first, it feels repetitive, but repetition is how alignment is built, and alignment is what makes scale possible. Mistakes still happen, but now they happen in a system that can recover, not in a fragile structure that depends on one person. And with each mistake, the team becomes stronger, more independent, more capable. Slowly, you realize something important. Your job is no longer to be the engine. Your job is to build the engine. And once the engine is running, your responsibility shifts again. You begin thinking beyond daily operations, beyond immediate problems, beyond short-term outcomes. You start thinking in layers, about structure, about sustainability, about long-term growth. The company is no longer just a business. It is becoming an organization, a system of systems. And that requires a different kind of thinking, a higher level of responsibility. Because now, your decisions affect not only your own future, but the future of everyone who has joined you on the journey. And that weight changes how you think about every choice. Carefully, deliberately, strategically. Leadership is no longer about control. It is about direction. And once you understand that, the next phase begins. Scale. Level 5. Scale, age 38. Revenue reaches levels your younger self could not imagine. Banks call you. Investors call you. Opportunities appear daily. You learn that growth creates new problems. Money no longer solves everything. Leadership becomes a challenge. Scale is different from growth. Growth feels exciting. Scale feels heavy. Because everything becomes larger than it used to be. Larger teams. Larger expectations. Larger responsibilities. And larger consequences for every decision. At this stage, small mistakes are no longer small. They multiply. They ripple across departments, teams, and systems. So decision-making becomes more intentional, slower, more calculated. You begin to understand that speed is not always an advantage at this level. Precision matters more. At the same time, attention becomes one of your most valuable resources. Everyone wants access to you. Everyone wants approval. Everyone wants decisions. But you quickly realize something important. If you try to respond to everything, you will lose control of what actually matters. So you begin filtering. Not every opportunity deserves attention. Not every problem deserves your involvement. Not every request deserves your time. This is where discipline evolves again. Not discipline in work, but discipline in attention. You learn to protect your focus. Because focus becomes a bottleneck of scale. Not money, not ideas, not opportunities. Focus, the ability to think clearly while everything around you demands urgency. At this level, you also begin to notice something else. You are no longer building only for profit. You are building for stability, for systems that can survive pressure, for teams that can function without constant intervention, for structures that remain strong even when conditions change. And that responsibility changes how you see success. Success is no longer just about increasing numbers. It is about maintaining control while numbers increase. It is about ensuring growth does not destroy what you built. There are moments when the weight of scale becomes visible. A single decision can impact thousands of people. A single strategy can change the direction of the entire company. A single mistake can take months to repair. So you start thinking differently, more like an architect than a worker, more like a strategist than an operator, more like someone building something meant to last. And in that process, you begin to understand something deeper. Scale does not just test your business. It tests you, your discipline, your patience, your emotional control, your ability to think long-term when pressure demands short-term reactions. Many people assume scaling a business is about expansion, but in reality, it is about control. Control over systems, control over decisions, control over yourself. Because without control, scale becomes chaos, and chaos destroys even successful structures. So you build safeguards, you build processes, you build leaders inside the organization who can carry responsibility without breaking under it. And slowly, the company becomes less dependent on you, not because you are less important, but because you have built something stable enough to stand on its own. That realization is both freeing and humbling. Freeing, because you are no longer trapped in every detail. Humbling, because you realize how much of success depends on others now. And as scale stabilizes, your thinking begins to shift again, away from expansion, toward meaning, toward legacy, toward what this all represents beyond numbers. Because when systems are stable, the next question always appears. What is all of this actually for? And that question leads into the next stage. Legacy. Level 6. Legacy, age 43. The numbers become large enough to change lives. You help your parents retire. You create opportunities for future generations. For the first time, your family experiences financial security as a normal part of life. Something your grandparents never knew. Something your children will never question. Legacy is different from scale. Scale is about expansion. Legacy is about meaning. At this stage, money stops feeling like a personal achievement. It starts feeling like a responsibility. A responsibility to people who came before you and people who will come after you. The first thing you do is look backward. You remember everything that was sacrificed to get here. The long nights, the uncertainty, the pressure of not knowing if things would work, the moments when quitting would have been easier. And then you look at your parents, the people who carried burdens quietly, the people who made sacrifices so you could have chances they never had, and you realize something powerful. This is the moment where their sacrifices begin to return value, not just emotionally, but physically, financially. You help them retire, not in struggle, not in survival mode, but in peace. For many people, this alone would feel like the final destination. But for you, it becomes the beginning of something larger. Because legacy is not a single act. It is a system that continues beyond you. You start thinking about structure again. But this time, not business structure, family structure, generational structure. You begin asking different questions. What will your children inherit beyond money? What mindset will they carry? What lessons will shape their decisions when you're not there to guide them? Because you understand something now. Money without wisdom does not last. Wealth without discipline does not survive generations. So you begin focusing on teaching, not just providing. You want the next generation to understand how wealth is built, not just enjoy what has been built. At the same time, your perspective on success shifts again. You stop measuring progress only in financial terms. You start measuring it in stability, in freedom, in the ability of your family to live without fear of basic survival. And for the first time, you see wealth as something deeper than numbers. You see it as protection. Protection from uncertainty. Protection from limitation. Protection from repeating cycles of struggle. But legacy also brings reflection. You begin to see the gap between where you started and where you are now. And that gap feels almost unreal. Not because of the money, but because of the transformation. The person you were at 18 would not recognize the life you have now. But that same person is still inside you. The one who observed quietly. The one who carried a notebook. The one who studied patterns when no one was watching. And you begin to realize something important. Nothing here happened suddenly. It was built slowly. One decision at a time. One pattern at a time. One discipline at a time. And now, those small beginnings have turned into something that can impact generations. That is what legacy truly is. Not just what you leave behind, but what you build that continues to grow after you. And as powerful as this stage is, it still is not the final stage. Because after legacy comes something even more personal. Freedom. Level 7. Freedom, age 48. One morning you wake up and realize something surprising. The money is no longer the achievement. The achievement is choice. Choice over your time. Choice over your future. Choice over the future of people you love. Freedom is not loud. It does not announce itself. It feels quiet. Almost ordinary. You wake up without urgency. Without pressure. Without the constant feeling that something needs to be fixed immediately. For the first time in years, your day is not controlled by demands. It is shaped by intention. You look at your calendar and realize something powerful. You are no longer reacting to life. You are designing it. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Because for most of your journey, time belonged to something else. First it belonged to survival. Then it belonged to building. Then it belonged to scaling. Then it belonged to responsibility. But now time belongs to you. And that is something most people never experience. You think back to the teenager with the notebook. The one who was not trying to be rich. Just trying to understand. Trying to see patterns in a world that most people move through without noticing. That version of you did not have money. But he had something more important. He had direction. And that direction never changed. Everything else grew around it. You begin to notice how freedom changes your thinking. You no longer chase opportunities out of fear. You choose them carefully. You no longer make decisions to escape pressure. You make decisions based on purpose. And slowly, life becomes less about accumulation and more about alignment. What actually matters now is not how much you can build, but what kind of life you want to live while you have the ability to choose. You spend more time with family, more time thinking, more time reflecting, not because you have less to do, but because you no longer need to prove anything through constant activity. And in that space, clarity grows. You start to see the full journey differently, not as a sudden rise, but as a long sequence of quiet decisions, some good, some uncertain, some painful, all necessary. You realize that freedom was never a single moment you arrived at. It was something you were building from the very beginning. Every time you chose observation over distraction, every time you chose reinvestment over consumption, every time you chose systems over shortcuts, you were building toward this stage without knowing its name. Now it finally has won. Freedom. But even freedom is not the final realization. Because as you look back further, you understand something deeper. The money was never the point. The business was never the point. Even freedom was not the ultimate goal. They were all consequences. The real foundation was something simpler. A mindset formed early. The ability to see differently. To think differently. To act differently. And that mindset is what changed everything. Because when you strip away the numbers, the titles, and the success, what remains is the person who started it all. Quiet, observant, consistent, and patient. And that is where everything truly began. Not at the top, but at the start. And that is the part most people miss. They look for the billionaire moment. But the real transformation happened long before that, in thousands of ordinary days, where nothing seemed special, but everything was being built. And that is the final truth of the journey. Freedom was not found. It was constructed, step by step, decision by decision, until one day you realize it was always yours.